All right, so now we move into Module 5. And so Module 5, I'm going to cover a lot of material. So stay tuned while we work our way through all of the good material for this week. Okay. So this fifth module is all about source code repositories, cloud automation. Well, I should say we're going to start cloud automation a little bit. Okay. And then we're also going to talk about the role of a cloud architect, and we'll walk through some examples of architectures. I will also show you some tools that we can use. Okay, so some of the tools that we use are, you'll see up on my screen here, but I'll show you because I'm going to be using tools that I use for this course. So let's go ahead and show you some of the tools that I use as we go through this module. All right. So let's start off with talking about a few things. So the learning outcomes, let's just kind of go through these. So let's talk about the learning outcomes. So number one, by the time you're done with this particular module, you should be able to explain how source code repositories work. You should be able to explain how these are a critical component for cloud-based platforms. You should be able to demonstrate how to create a source code repository on a common platform like GitHub. Okay? We will be using GitHub for this class. Another common platform is GitLab. So you're more than welcome to go out and explore GitLab. So here you go. All right. You should be able to think about how these cloud repositories are critical to link to cloud automation tools. I'm going to talk about cloud automation today. I'm not going to demonstrate it quite yet. We'll pick that up in Module 6. But cloud automation will enable us to actually go out and do provisioning and management of our cloud infrastructure and test it and verify it and make it a repeatable function for our organization. Okay? We'll talk about cloud architecture in general. We'll talk about how do you take generic business problems and dissect those and turn those into an architecture. We'll talk about inventory of systems. We'll talk about cloud diagramming software like Lucidchart or Cloudcraft. Okay? Make sure that you do a few things this week. So number one, you need to make sure you sign up for your free GitHub Student Developer Pack. There's the link to it. Okay? And this is critical because this tool is going to, let's see what's wrong with this link here. I'm not sure. Anyways, the link's in this document. You can copy and paste it, and I'll try to fix this later. Make sure you sign up for your free GitHub Student Developer Pack. Okay, that's going to give you, let me just show you what that is. GitHub Student Pack. This is going to give you all sorts of free goodies. Okay, no credit card required for this either. It's going to give you access to training and learning materials, but it's also going to give you a lot of cool things. So you're going to be able to do Canva, so you can utilize this if you choose to for your presentation later in the course. You're going to get free access to the GitHub Pro as long as you're a student. Okay? There's a free GitHub as well, but you get access to the Pro version. You'll get access to Microsoft Azure. You already have access to AWS Educate, so you should be good there. You'll get some free domain names if you want to take advantage of these things. You'll get free access to development environments. So some of you I know are playing with development. So there's some things there. There's a lot of other things here. DigitalOcean, Heroku, even maybe some classes that you can take for free, etc. Okay, so take a look at all the different things you have out here. Atom is what I'm using over here to do text editing. So I'm using Atom here. And so there's a lot of really cool things you can take a look at that you get for free as students. Okay? A very big list. All right, the second thing is there's an ungraded learning lab that I strongly encourage you to do. Okay? I'm not going to require it, but I strongly encourage you to do this ungraded lab because it's going to give you the experience you needed to use GitHub. Okay? We don't actually have a homework at this point with just GitHub, so this would be a good way for you to practice it. Okay? You need to read the materials, obviously. You've got the discussion, then you've got homework number 3, which you'll start on. Okay? And I will be doing a walkthrough of that on September 28th at 5 p.m. Okay? So tomorrow. All right, so some of the things that you have here to do in terms of readings, this week's not going to be very heavy on the readings or videos other than what I'm going to do in my videos. Okay, so this week you've got cloud architecture and you've got cloud architecture and introduction to Terraform. And then you've got 2 videos here, introduction to GitHub and GitHub intro learning lab video. Okay? So you don't have a ton of videos to watch, but you will have this one's pretty long that I'm working on right now. Okay? Module 4 has been posted. It's about 15 minutes long, and it talks about the Module 4 stuff. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started and kind of work our way through this particular list. So first of all, let's talk about source code repositories. So a source code repository allows us to store our application, our database, files, configurations, code, pretty much anything that we would need on a host and version control it, okay? And so if I need to go back in time and see what's changed, I can easily do so. So GitLab is one such platform. GitHub is another. They're both using a product that's open source called Git, okay? Hence GitHub, GitLab. They're very similar. So you can go explore on their websites and learn more about each one, okay? Now, we're going to use GitHub because that's what I've chosen to use for this course. So I've got some really great examples to show you here, okay? We can see that I have updated or committed to the cloud course here 100 and some odd times. And we can go back and see all the changes that I've made going back in time here, okay? So I can go back to any point in time and click on something and see what it looked like, several months ago, okay? It also allows me to store things in a format with this MD, which stands for Markdown, which allows things to be formatted nicely. Okay. So I told you at the beginning of the course, this is your backup. If Cougar Courses is not working for some reason, you can always go out here to my GitHub and see all the materials related to the course. Okay. So you can see it's almost like a web page here, okay? And it has links to actual specific documents. Okay. So this is my repository. Now I can go out and I can do things with this code. I can download it. I can clone it locally to my computer here. I can even open in GitHub Desktop, which I've installed, which is a program you can install if you want on a computer. Okay. I can even download a zip file of the entire class, everything I have here, and I could then publish it on Cougar Courses. I could do whatever I want with it. But what I'm doing here is I'm making changes to the code as we go along. So as I make this README file here, I can edit this right here on the web. I'm not signed in right now, but if I were signed in, I'd be able to edit the file right here. Save the changes, and then when I go to my GitHub desktop here, let's just go ahead and commit my change. My local change is up to the server. But if I made a change on the server side, I'd be able to pull from up here on GitHub, okay, those changes. And then they would show up on my computer here. Now, I'm making my changes in a text editor here. So let's just say I want to go ahead and I want to modify module 5. I want to make some changes to it. I have a local copy of this file. I can go ahead and make some changes. So let's go ahead and I'll change this to say optional, but highly encouraged. Oops. There we go. And we can see locally here, it's changed. But if I were to go out here to my cloud management course, and I were to go to learning resources here, and I look for module 5, and this is my README file. If I clicked on it, my changes are not here yet. So if I save them, they're saved, but they're still not here. See what I'm saying? They're not here yet. So how do I make them appear here? I have to commit my change. So I go over here and my local client for GitHub recognize I made a change. It shows me exactly what I changed. Here's the original file. Here's my new file. It's highlighted my change for me. I could go ahead and update the file. I can say, you know, I added an optional line. Okay. It's a good idea to put comments in here. You'll notice in mine, I was a little lazy and didn't do it. It's just me working on this. But this helps other people. So I commit it. But it's still not up there. What's going on? What I've done is I've committed my local change to my local computer, but I haven't pushed it out to GitHub. So now it's telling me, do I want to push it? So now I push it, and now if I refresh the page, my change has been pushed out. Okay. This allows me to have backup copies of every file and every change that I've ever made. So if I have a problem, I can revert back to a working version of this. In the cloud, we don't want to be making manual changes to files. We don't want to do things manually. We want to make it where we can have a recovery point to immediately fail back if something breaks. Okay? This also allows us to rapidly push out application fixes. Okay? So we don't want to wait for months and months and months to do something. We don't want to accidentally break something either. So we use version control to allow us to have quick recovery points. Okay? So, in a nutshell, that's what a source code repository is for. Now, how does this relate to cloud automation? Once we have everything we need in a repository, then we can then use automation to automatically pull from that repository and then copy the application code, the configuration files, etc., out to our systems that we build in the cloud automatically. We can also even have that automation platform build VMs, containers, storage environments, network devices, load balancers. All of that cloud infrastructure can be automatically provisioned using templates and configurations we put in I'm gonna have to pause that. All right. So we were talking about source code repositories and cloud automation. And so the next topic I want to talk about is cloud architecture. Okay. So cloud architecture, we're going to use some tools which, if you've had me before, we've used in other classes. Um, but the main tool I'm going to show you is Lucidchart. And so Lucidchart, you can sign up as a student and get a free student account using the link that's on my screen here. If you just Google Lucidchart students, you can find that link pretty easily. And I will show you what that looks like in a second. The other tool we haven't used before is called Cloudcraft. Excuse me. This is AWS specific, okay, and you can do it for free. And one of the things I do like about it here is it's very pretty looking. Okay? So it's very easy for non-technical people to understand visually what you're building. Okay? So you can get started using the free here. If it asks for a credit card, then don't enter it. But this is an option that you can use for doing visual diagrams, assuming you're going to go with an AWS architecture. And for your homework assignment, you're going to build out an architecture. Okay, so let's go ahead. For homework 4, actually, you're going to do a cloud architecture. So you've got a few weeks to think about this and play around with these design software. But basically, starting in homework 4, you're going to have a scenario involving a fictional company that is looking to move to the cloud. And so you will, in homework 4, you'll create a cloud architecture drawing using something like Cloudcraft or Lucidchart, your choice. Okay. And then you'll also write up a narrative. Homework 3 is what you're going to work on starting this week, though, and that's where we talk about Vault. So I'm going to go through that on Monday the 28th in the evening. Okay. So if you are unsure what to do for homework 3, it is posted. You can take a look and then come to the Q&A, and I will walk through this with you. Now let's go ahead and show you Lucidchart. Okay, so now I've signed into Lucidchart here, and it's going to pop up. I've already done some other diagrams for other things, but you're going to go ahead and for your homework 4, if you use Lucidchart, you're going to click New. You can use this for your project as well, but you can do New. And for your architecture, you might as well just do blank document. Okay? And this is going to pull up something that allows you to do a visual architecture drawing for your proposed solution. Now, in this week's material, so if you go into Module 5 and where's Module 5? I have created a cloud architecture document here that I'm going to walk through now and talk about the usage of the diagramming software. Okay? So this diagramming software is like what it looks like. It's drawing software. Okay? So there's simple shapes that exist already, and you can add additional shapes at any time. So you can find shapes that are in different things, so different categories. So AWS architecture, boom, we could do that one. Okay, if we're going to use Azure, we could do the Azure one. And then if we wanted to clean things up a bit, since this is an architecture, we can get rid of these general shapes that we don't need. And then we could do Google Cloud as well if we wanted to. When we're done, oops, all these. The flowchart. When we're done, we can do use selected shapes. There we now we've got shapes from all these cloud platforms. So we can start doing a drawing based on our business requirements. So I'm just going to do a very simple example here. So let's go ahead and see what examples we have. So we could go and say we need to have a container. And we need a database. And we're going to have a Docker instance somewhere. And we can do things like lines between these drawings. So we can connect them together. Things like this. So we can connect different shapes together, and we can put together logical separations of components. So we could go and do things like we could have our outward facing piece here. We could then wall off our database piece. And oops. We can add in some things like looks like the AWS did get added. We can do Google, and then we want the geometric shapes, so we can go ahead and do like rectangles around the boxes and things like that. Okay. That gives us a lot more shapes here. So you can see for like EC2, just go past, with EC2 we can actually pick the machine size type. So we can really define specifically what we're going to deploy. We can just do those colorized rectangles to show this is, maybe this is US East, this is US West. When we build our diagram, we want to make sure it's as complete as possible with all the relevant services that we think we're going to need, and then also show the interactions amongst those systems. Now, at the architecture level, you don't need to understand or even know the specifics of how the database is going to talk to the application, or the application is going to talk to the web server. But you need to be able to depict that there is some sort of connection between the two. Okay. Now, let's go through the cloud architecture section here, and I'll talk a bit about this. And then I'm happy to go through this on Wednesday. Monday's going to be taken up by Homework 3, but on Wednesday of this week, I'm happy to go through and talk through some examples of architecture with you. Okay? So you have to complete several activities in order to define the architecture for your cloud architecture. Okay? So the first thing is you have to do an audit and inventory of existing systems. Okay? So first thing we do is scoping. We have to determine what's the focus of our audit that we're going to perform on our IT systems. And so this is where we determine what's in scope, what's out of scope. If we're saying that we're only going to look at accounting systems, then maybe we state up front that we're not going to look at marketing systems as they're out of scope. Okay? If we've been given any information ahead of time, perhaps some background information, then we can use that to help determine scope. Okay? And so in homework 4, you're going to be doing an architecture given a scenario. Okay? The planning piece So this is where we take the scope and we increase the level of detail in our plan. This is where we start creating our project planning documents. We start engaging stakeholders in the planning process. And as our plan becomes more of a final version, we start communicating our project schedule to stakeholders. We get their input. This is where we define our workflow for our project, and we start thinking about things like risk matrix. What happens if we were to shift this particular system to a new cloud architecture? Okay. The next phase is where we gather data. And so we gather data by several methods. Number one is we can interview people, our stakeholders, to get user stories. Okay, so if I'm tasked with moving the accounting systems to the cloud, I don't know the first thing about accounting. So what do I need to do? I need to go talk to the accounting department and understand what systems do they have, what systems do they use, how do they use them, and this involves me asking questions and the users telling me stories. Okay? The second method of gathering data is we can review existing documentation if we have it. The third area is observing and documenting key business processes. So I actually watch how someone does a particular task, and then I document that business process. And that allows me to see the inputs and the outputs of that process and what systems are involved. Now, as we go through this data gathering process, this is also a great place for us to identify where we have opportunities to automate. So it's critical that we focus on getting as much detailed documentation as we go through this process. Okay? By the time we finish the data gathering stage, we should have an inventory of systems, data, the data flows in and out of systems, process flows, stakeholders, and any software. Okay? Then after we've data gathered, we do what's called the analysis phase. And so that's where we do an in-depth analysis of all the data we've gathered. We identify our recommendations, and we begin compiling a report. And during this process, we might also use strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or a SWOT analysis to aid in our decision making. Okay? And then the last phase is reporting. So this is where we prepare our report to management if we're seeking approval to build a cloud project. Okay? If we don't have approval or don't need to get approval to proceed, then we use this report to begin compiling our specific IT requirements and then ultimately decide on our appropriate cloud architecture. Okay? So after we've done our systems audit, we start looking at requirements. So this is where we start curating the detailed business requirements for each IT system. Okay? So these requirements must be detailed enough for someone who is unfamiliar with the system to be able to either develop software to meet their requirements or be able to find an existing system that meets the requirements. So as an example, an accounting team, they have a need for a payroll processing system. And then that payroll processing system must be able to support 1,000 users. And it must be able to run a payroll process within 1 hour. These are all just made up requirements. Okay? So at this point, with that information, as part of the requirements gathering stage, we would go and get very detailed requirements of exactly what does that system need to look like. Okay? Then, once we've determined the requirements, we go out and we create an architecture. Now, we may not know enough about that particular field, so we go out and we solicit vendors to give us information on payroll systems. And so usually it's a build versus buy decision. Are we going to build something ourselves, in which case we would build cloud infrastructure to host our application for payroll? Or are we going to just buy something? In this case, we would purchase a SaaS product, a SaaS application that just does payroll for us. Okay? And then we just buy instead of building it ourselves. Okay? That's all part of this based on requirements that drives what we do. Now, there's a business requirements document here where I have a video that I highly recommend that you watch. The other thing is you're going to compile your business requirements and you're also going to categorize and prioritize those requirements. So are they critical path to move forward at all? Or could they wait for a future phase? Okay? And so think about if you had a finite amount of dollars, which is a realistic scenario, and a finite amount of time to implement something. You can't implement every single thing in the first release, or you'll take forever to get it roll out to your customer. So what do you do instead? You phase your release. You phase your migration. Okay? And so as part of that, you've got to understand exactly what you want to do. So I've got an example in the materials here about a financial system. Okay? So you might take a look at that and see some of the examples of actionable system requirements. Now, software that you're going to use, you could use Lucidchart, which is a great option because it'll allow you to do multi-cloud across multiple cloud providers, even include on-premise if you wish. Okay? And you can also include SaaS platforms. And so I'm going to show you some examples here in just a second. The second one is Cloudcraft, which I showed you on the screen a minute ago. And the third is Draw.io. The fourth is Microsoft Visio, which CSUSM has available via Cougar Apps. So if nothing else, you could always use Microsoft Visio through Cougar Apps. All right. Now, there's a video on Module 5 about creating a cloud architecture. Okay. Now, the last thing is we've got some of your fellow students in the past who took this course who created various cloud architectures, okay, ranging from very high level to very detailed. Okay. So these 6 examples are all examples of cloud architecture from previous students who took this class, who gave permission to post the materials. And so if we look at the example here, here's the first one. This is a very high level that the students intend to use a variety of SaaS systems, and this shows interactions between these different SaaS systems. So for example, Salesforce is at the center of it all. Salesforce then has a two-way connection with Hootsuite, okay? And they use that for their social media. They have a two-way connection between Salesforce and MailChimp. That's what they use to engage their users. Okay. So that's one example just showing their SaaS providers. Okay. If I go out and I look at some of these other examples, that's the same one. Here's another example. Actually, you didn't see my screen. It was in the wrong screen. Give me just a second. Go back to that example. This is just SaaS providers. This alone wouldn't be sufficient. Okay. Assignments change from semester to semester, but this shows you that they show their interactions between different SaaS providers. Okay. Now, another example that we have is this one here. And so this example, the students just used Google Cloud Platform, and what they have is they have multiple regions and they have multiple zones. They show down to even network level with made-up IP addresses. And you can see that they have a data store, cloud storage, cloud memory store. They have containers. Okay. They have a separate machine learning environment. They're using firewall. They're using security and identity and all these other things. Okay. So that's another example of a diagram. What's probably more relevant to this class is the students put together that they have users who connect through their own gateway through the internet, and they connect to these services, which connect to these services, which then connect within GCP to these other services, okay? Like cloud data stores, containers, G Suite, etc. These are all just examples of a student doing a cloud architecture. This one here is just showing more of the network and security architecture. So you might decide to do multiple drawings for different aspects of the cloud. So you might have one for the network management and security. You might have one for your compute and databases. Or you might have one for your front-facing systems to your customers. I don't have any specific requirements of what it needs to look like, other than you need to follow the instructions in the homework. In this diagram, the students did a VPC, and so you can see they've built out multiple regions for the VPCs. Okay. And then the last one here that I'll show you is their high level, which includes SaaS and IaaS. Okay. So they've got their external SaaS providers here, and they've got their IaaS here. And they've got the VPC with 3 regions with their infrastructure in it. Okay. And then they also have their public cloud here with multiple regions as well. So this is their example of their architecture. Okay. If you did it with AWS, it would look very similar to this as well. Okay. All right. So we talked about all the architecture, and then we talked about the source control. So I really encourage you to practice the source control using GitHub. You don't have to install anything to use GitHub, you just use your web browser. If you have your own computer, you're certainly welcome to set up things like Atom and the GitHub desktop client. You could even set up Git on your command line if you want. Okay? And then connect your Git to GitHub. But the materials you go through on GitHub will explain how to do all of that. All that I'm asking you to do is go through the tutorial that GitHub has when you set this all up. Okay? Now, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this video. But remember, homework 3, we're going to talk through and walk through it on Monday, the 28th of October. Sorry, gosh, it's not October yet. September, 20th of September, tomorrow. We're going to walk through that together. And then I will do on Wednesday some more demos of homework 4 related to cloud architecture. And then next week when we get together, we're actually going to go through and start doing Terraform and using Terraform to do automation. Okay? And when we do the Terraform to do the automation, we're going to actually connect it to our GitHub. Okay, so it's going to be very important for you to make sure that you have things set up. Okay?